Donald Trump is resorting to mudslinging against Kamala Harris despite his advisors' better judgment to stick with policy talk. The former president is pressing ahead, lobbing insults at her whenever he can. Take a look.
So I decided to go back and reread the clause. I'm not saying he's, but I say that I am much better looking than her. I think I'm much better. Much better. I'm a better looking person than Kamala, who, by the way, is worse than Biden, and she's actually not as smart. Okay? She's actually not as smart. As far as the personal attacks, I'm very angry at her because of what she's done to the country. I'm very angry at her that she'd weaponized the justice system against me and other people. Very angry at her. I think I'm entitled to personal attacks. I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence. And I think she'll be a terrible president. Well, I have to do that. Well, I don't think she's a very bright person. I do feel that. I mean, I think that's right. I think I am a very bright person. And a lot of people say that. I don't think she's a very bright person. And you know what? Our country needs a very smart person. And I don't think she's a very smart person. So I'm not looking to, I don't consider that an insult. That's just a fact.
Joining us now to discuss what's driving Trump's need to attack is Democratic strategist, founder and CEO of Blueprint Strategy, Antjuan Seawright. Thank you for coming on, Antjuan.
It's so good to be with you.
So what do you think is driving this decision by Donald Trump to stick with the personal attacks?
Well, when you do not have substance, you automatically pivot to or turn to stupidity. And that's what we see from the former president. At the end of the day, he does not have the bandwidth, the depth, or the width, for that matter, to deal with and have a reasonable discussion when it comes to the issues with Vice President Kamala Harris. The prosecutor versus the prosecuted, the policymaker versus the political pump faker. That's the narrative. He does not know how to handle that, and so he reverts back to his comfort zone, whether it's racism, misogyny, or just total disrespect for a qualified woman who happens to be black serving to be the next president of the United States.
I think we're going to be pretty far apart on this, but let me just pose this to you. Democrats for years and years and years have attacked Donald Trump using, I would say, very harsh rhetoric, calling him a fascist, Cheeto, Hitler. The media commonly makes fun of his appearance, his hair, his size, his hands, everything. I would say that's all fair game. We have free speech, a First Amendment society. It's okay to be harshly critical, even disparaging of our political figures. I think that's true of Donald Trump. It was true of Hillary Clinton, but it should also be true of Kamala Harris, no?
Look, politics is a contact sport, and so we expect that. However, when it comes to the former president, it was he who started the whole idea of being disrespectful. It's one thing to have disagreement on the issues. It's another thing to be disrespectful towards the candidate. When you start your political journey or your political career by saying the first African-American president of the United States is not an American citizen, that's just disrespect. And when you handle a candidate for president, arguably one of the most qualified in the history of this country, the way he did Hillary Clinton, that had nothing to do with Democrats. In fact, it was Democrats, Michelle Obama, who said to the world, when they go low, we go high. However, we have, in my opinion, we switched that model a bit. And I've said this publicly, when they go low, we go with the flow. And so that means when they punch at us, we punch back politically, and also add muscle mass and muscle memory to who Donald Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans are, but also what they represent. Unfortunately, a bully cannot take the punch when it's punching back on them or at them.
Yeah, I mean, for the we go low, go higher type, Barack Obama made a joke about, or implied that Donald Trump's obsession with crowd size had something to do with the size of something else. I mean, I
think you may be reading too much into what the president was saying.
I don't think so.
Remember, it was Donald Trump who personally started his political career attacking Barack Obama, blatantly disrespect, uplifting things, calling his wife, saying his wife looks like a gorilla. And so let's just be honest and let's call balls and strikes as we see them. If those things were said about you or your family member or anything else, you would have the type of response we see coming from Democrats in this cycle. And what we've learned from the 2016 cycle is that when we don't respond accordingly, voters are angry and they're frustrated by it because they want to know they have a fighter in their candidate.
Now, the rhetoric sunk to a new low among people on Team Trump in the Trump camp. Now, there are some sites selling T-shirts reading the slogan, "Joe and the Ho gotta go." People won't find these on Amazon. The Giant pulled them from their site in 2020 after receiving backlash. So it's even too low for Jeff Bezos, but elsewhere on the internet is still selling these T-shirts. What do you make of the Trump camp following suit with Donald Trump's personal attacks and this "Joe and the Ho gotta go" slogan?
Because they do not know anything else. And so we're going to see more of this because there's a certain segment of the population who thrives off this. And unfortunately, Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republicans survive off of this. And that's where Democrats, yes, we have to punch back, but we also have to speak to a larger segment of the population here in this country who do care about the issues, who do not buy into right-wing red meat racism and extremism, misogyny, and all the things that come along with Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Trump's Project 2025.
Yeah, I mean, there is going to, I think it's not true to say that there's no focus on issues. I mean, right now, Republicans are making that accusation against Democrats. They're having a pep rally that was light on issues. I don't think that's particularly noteworthy or wrong. The convention serves as a pep rally, but they're going to do a debate and they're going to talk about the issues. And polls show that majorities of people actually agree with Trump on many, aside from abortion, on all the other important issues, the economy, foreign policy, et cetera.
Well, that's not true. And it's sad that we're starting to hear some of the same rhetoric from the Trump campaign that we hear in the mainstream media. At the end of the day, the Financial Times came out with a notable survey that says that majority of Americans trust Kamala Harris when it comes to the economy. When it comes to reproductive freedom, yes, she's winning women from, I think, a 6-1 margin. When it comes to things like infrastructure and healthcare, all those things are coming in her favor. That's why you see the polls in what was once uncertain ground becoming fertile ground, but not just Kamala Harris, but for Democrats up and down the ballot. And so we're happy to talk about issues without having to revert to insults. Unfortunately, the former president cannot stay message disciplined enough to do that because he has no substance when it comes to the issue. It's even to the point where you have fellow Republicans going on national TV begging him to stop the insults and focus on the actual issues that are facing the American people.
So at a time when actually progressive policies are polling quite well, not just among Democrats, but among all likely voters, Republicans included, some of those policies are expanding Medicare to cover dental, vision, and hearing. That's polling at 61%, strongly supporting that policy, cutting the cost of prescription drugs at 60%, making the wealthy and large corporations pay their fair share in taxes, 64%. I want to ask about that one because one of the key impacts of the Trump presidency was the 2025 tax cuts, which were permanent for America's biggest corporations. We saw them increase their profits by $1 trillion annually since this went into effect. And I think a lot of the American people are not happy that Donald Trump cut taxes permanently on corporate profits when regular working and middle class people are struggling, and those tax cuts were by a smaller margin and not permanent. How much of this election do you think is determined by Trump losing ground with this base of regular working people? And how do you see Kamala Harris gaining those voters and that leading to these personal attacks because he can no longer run as a populist since he governed as an elitist?
Well, I wouldn't call these policies progressive. I would call them policies that speak to the American people and their generational needs. There's nothing progressive about a bipartisan infrastructure bill co-led by Kamala Harris that benefits everyone. There's nothing progressive about having more Americans with health care than ever before in the history of this country. There's nothing progressive about cutting Black child poverty in half. There's nothing progressive about the largest investment in the climate crisis in the history of the world. There's nothing progressive about first time having gun legislation in this country in 30 years when we see violent crimes coming down. And certainly there's nothing progressive about a bipartisan border security bill that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance decided to put a death knell to. And so there's nothing progressive about the policies. And the reason you see scientific data backing up the American people and aligning them with this policy is because the Biden-Harris administration and perhaps the Kamala Harris presidency will be one that will uplift the middle class, build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, and everyone will benefit. And the wealthy will have to step up and pay their fair share. The contrast to that is when 83% of the benefits in the Trump tax scam went to the wealthiest in this country. And so when we talk about lowering prescription drugs for our seniors, when we talk about capping the price of insulin, when we talk about building 3 million homes because there's a supply issue in this country, there's nothing progressive about that. Those things are American issues that generationally we've been challenged with in this country.
I think that's really well said, Antjuan Seawright. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.